People who met Eleanor Whitmore in her later years often described her as calm, gentle, and impossibly wise. She spoke slowly, choosing her words as if each one carried weight. Her eyes, soft and observant, seemed to understand people before they finished speaking. To many, she appeared to be a woman who had lived a peaceful life. But peace was not how her story began. Eleanor was born in 1948 in a small, struggling town in rural Ohio. Her childhood home was a narrow wooden house with peeling paint and drafty windows that rattled during winter storms. Her father worked long hours at a steel mill, while her mother stayed home, overwhelmed and emotionally distant. Love was not something that flowed freely in the Whitmore household. Survival was the priority. From a young age, Eleanor learned silence. When her parents argued, and they often did, she would retreat to her room, clutching a worn library book, escaping into stories where people were kinder and endings were fair. At school, she was shy and observant, more comfortable listening than speaking. Pain, for her, was not loud. It was quiet, constant, and deeply personal. At 16, Eleanor lost her father to a factory accident. The grief was sudden and crushing. Overnight, her family fell into deeper financial hardship. Her mother became bitter, working multiple jobs and growing colder by the day. Eleanor, still a teenager, took on adult responsibilities, cooking meals, paying bills, comforting her younger brother while no one comforted her. Youth, for Eleanor, was not a time of dreams. It was a time of endurance. At 18, she married Thomas Whitmore, a man 10 years older than her. He was charming at first, confident, and promised stability, something Eleanor had never known. She believed marriage would be her escape, her fresh start. It wasn't. Thomas was controlling, emotionally distant, and deeply insecure. He didn't hit her, but his words carried their own kind of violence. He criticized her intelligence, dismissed her feelings, and slowly isolated her from friends and family. Eleanor learned another painful lesson: not all cages have bars. By her mid-20s, Eleanor was a mother of 2. She loved her children fiercely, but motherhood came with exhaustion and loneliness. Thomas worked late, often drank, and offered little support. Eleanor spent long nights awake, rocking babies and wondering how life had become so heavy so quickly. Still, she endured. Pain had taught her resilience, though she didn't yet recognize it as strength. In her 30s, Eleanor made a quiet decision that would change everything. She enrolled in night classes at a local community college. It wasn't glamorous. She studied after putting her children to bed, often exhausted, often doubting herself. But learning awakened something inside her, a sense of identity beyond survival. Education became her rebellion. Thomas mocked her efforts, calling them pointless. But Eleanor persisted. With every class she passed, she reclaimed a small piece of herself. Years later, she earned a degree in social work and began working at a community center, helping women who reminded her painfully of her younger self. By 42, Eleanor found the courage to leave her marriage. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no grand exit. Just a quiet resolve shaped by years of reflection. She packed her belongings, took her children, and walked away from a life that had slowly drained her spirit. Freedom was terrifying, but also transformative. The following years were difficult. Money was tight. She worked long hours. But for the first time, her pain had purpose. She listened deeply to others because she had once longed to be heard. She offered patience because life had taught her how rare it was. As Eleanor aged, something remarkable happened. Her pain softened into understanding. In her 50s, she became known as the woman who listens. Neighbors sought her advice. Coworkers trusted her judgment. She never claimed to have answers, but she asked the right questions. She knew that healing didn't come from being told what to do, but from being truly seen. By the time Eleanor reached her 70s, her hair had turned silver, her steps slower, but her presence carried quiet authority. She volunteered at shelters, mentored young women, and spoke at small community gatherings. She didn't tell inspirational stories in grand speeches. She told the truth, about hardship, about mistakes, about survival. And people listened. One afternoon, a young woman asked her, "Do you regret your youth? All that pain?" Eleanor smiled gently before answering. "No," she said. "Pain was my teacher. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but it taught me compassion, patience, and humility. Wisdom doesn't come from comfort. It comes from reflection." In her final years, Eleanor lived in a modest home filled with books, handwritten letters, and memories. Her children visited often. They didn't see her as a woman defined by suffering, but as one shaped by it. When Eleanor passed away peacefully at 84, there was no headline, no monument. But at her memorial service, the room overflowed. Women she had mentored. Families she had helped. Strangers whose lives she had quietly touched. Her youth had been full of pain. But her old age was rich with wisdom, and that wisdom lived on in everyone she left behind.